After serving 34 years in federal prison, a serial bank robber is back on the streets of Inglewood after being granted compassionate release by the Biden administration. At 61 years old, he puts together another six-figure robbery before jumping on a plane to the Virgin Islands. But after sitting down for so many years, he didn't realize how good technology has gotten, and the feds realized that they made a mistake, letting him out 27 years early. Rap news, street politics, and we back with season 2 of How to Rob. We going through the most prolific flock teams and robbery crews in the city of LA. In the last episode, we gave y'all the Chesapeake Bandits, coming out the West Boulevards and the jungles, and we sticking to the script, armor truck robberies only. But this time we bringing a one-man team to the spotlight, 61-year-old Markham Bond, out of the city of Inglewood. Now, Markham Bond is somewhat a mystery to the streets of LA. His gang affiliation is unknown, but after serving so many years in prison, this is potentially the most accredited criminal we'll have on this series. He's a military veteran coming out the Air Force, and after serving 3 years, he jumped off the porch selling heroin with his father to undercover federal agents. And after hitting the bank robbery scene and then moving to armored truck robberies in the 80s and the 90s, he's accumulated 3 federal indictments, blew trial twice, and after making it out with $465,000 across a span of 8 robberies, he was sentenced to 46 years in the feds back in 1994. Now he's back in the city of Inglewood, and he's back laying the armored truck guards down, bare face, broad daylight. Now everything changed for Bond back in 2021. In the middle of COVID, he's sitting in prison and he's getting restless. He decides to take his shot after seeing multiple people get pardoned by the Biden administration and sends a letter to the judge. He stated that he's aged out of crime, almost 27 years into a 46-year sentence. He shows regret for the damage that he caused to his victims and the community. He asked for a chance to build a safe life outside of prison and stated that it'll never become an embarrassment to the federal court system if they made the decision to give him a second chance at life. Now, when this letter landed on the judge's desk, clearly they didn't make the proper assessment as to who exactly Markham Bond was and what he was capable of doing. But nonetheless, February 2022, Markham Bond is released from federal prison, given a train ticket down to Union Station and the phone number of a relative that he doesn't even know. But after landing back in the city, we got to start at 725 Hendry Avenue between Hillcrest and Arborvitae in the city of Inglewood. This building is the West Side Residences. It's a veteran living community comprised of studio apartments, and this is where Markham Bond has set up shop back in his hometown. Now, Bond has came out, got himself a little Benz. He has a military pension from an honorable discharge in the Air Force, and he's also on a 12-year term of federal supervised release. But other factors that went into Bond's compassionate release, he alleged that his health was also on a decline. He cited a kidney disease along with other things that deemed him no longer a danger to the community. But Bond seemingly was having an issue with how fast life was moving after sitting down for so long. He got himself a cell phone, an Instagram account, he's made a YouTube account, and this is where the problems begin. He thinks that his phone is hacked and that somebody is following him. He becomes paranoid, and he's meeting with different VA-assisted programs to talk about the paranoia. He's then diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder and a bipolar disorder and put on prescription. But Bond decides to leave his prescription alone and decides to self-medicate with meth and powder. And by March of 2023, a year after he's released, it's said that Bond is spending some of his days wandering around the intersection, tweaking off drugs. But by May of 2023, Bond has wandered to San Bernardino, and he's inside an apartment complex, breaking into cars. This is when he comes up on a popular vehicle that a lot of these robbery crews like to use, a Chevy Tahoe. Now, this Tahoe has some distinct features: some black rims, a broken out back window covered by a black plastic bag, and these make it very recognizable. But nonetheless, Bond breaks into this Tahoe and drives it back to his house in Inglewood. Now, Bond begins to rack up some parking tickets in this Tahoe, but he realizes that everything is good. It hasn't been reported stolen for whatever reason. So he starts to get comfortable, and he realizes it's time to play ball again with what he knows best: robbery. After hitting 8 banks in his past with different disguises and tactics, Bond picks a target 10 minutes away from his house off Sepulveda and La Tierra, Chase Bank. Now, one thing he does realize is that going inside the bank is out of style. So this is when he starts plotting. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, the Brinks truck route to this location. Now, Brinks, of course, works on a strict schedule. They have a specific route laid out on specific days, and they're always at the same location within the hour each day that location is scheduled. So Bond spent some time over the next couple months scouting this Brinks truck, but it wasn't a sloppy plan. So this location on Sepulveda and La Tierra is the airport route. Now, Brinks has multiple branches to their business, one of which handles local businesses and neighborhoods. The other one is called Brinks Global Division, and that's the branch that services the airport. They handle imports and exports of various jewels and diamonds. And Bond is hoping to get lucky, thinking that this same airport route could hold some of those diamonds. And this is what takes us to Friday, August 18, 2023, 10 o'clock in the morning. Bond, like every Friday, pulls up in the stolen green Tahoe, and he pops his head out at 10:01 a.m. He's wearing a black Raiders hat, sunglasses, white shoes, blue jeans, and he has his jacket open, exposing a burgundy shirt. Now, Bond parked on La Tierra, but he walks from the vehicle and he sits at a Culver City bus stop. As the bus passes Bond, he decides he needs a closer vantage point. He knows at any minute Brinks is pulling up. So he walks to Sepulveda, directly next to the bank, and he leans against the stop sign, still bare face, completely exposed. He's fiddled with his jacket, taking it off and on, zipped it up. And at 10:25 a.m., the Brinks truck enters the parking lot. Now, inside this truck are 2 veteran Brinks employees, an individual named Carlos, who's the driver, and Derek, who's the courier. Again, they do this route 3 times a week. They're very comfortable. This is a busy shopping center, and they're not paying attention to Bond, lifting up a blue gator, finally covering his face. Now, the courier undergoes a process in the back of the Brinks truck before jumping out. At this specific branch, Derek has to take the bag of money, which is a clear bag that exposes all of the bills, and he has to put it in what Brinks refers to as a cold bag, which is the blue Brinks bag that everybody knows when they see Brinks. So, of course, the cold bag is to hide the money so everybody can't see what they're bringing into the bank. But Derek has $150,000 on it and a couple thousand in coins, so he needed a hand truck. He loads the cold bag and the coins onto the hand truck and jumps out the back. Now, Derek has a gun on him, but again, he's extremely comfortable. This is his normal route. He's walking with his head down, and this is when our man pulls his pistol out and approaches Derek. When Derek picks his head up, he's staring down the barrel of Markham Bond's pistol, and Bond says, "I got you, bro. Drop it. Don't try anything." Derek's first reaction is to go for his pistol, but Bond again said, "I got you," and he lays Derek all the way down. Bond strips him of the $150,000, and in less than 20 seconds, he pulled off a 6-figure move less than 2 years after being released from prison. Now, the driver of the Brinks truck, Carlos, he watched this whole situation unfold. He immediately pulled his pistol out when he seen Derek getting laid down, but he had an epiphany. He realized that if he opened that door, somebody could be coming from behind that truck. So Carlos put his gun away and turned on the surveillance cameras inside the truck to capture the whole robbery. Now, Bond, at 61 years old, took off. He's northbound on Sepulveda, and witnesses say they saw him running past them out of breath. Bond makes it back to the Tahoe, and he's out of there, eastbound on La Tierra, and then again north on Sepulveda, and he disappears. Now, with this being such a hot area, when LAPD robbery and homicide got to the scene, they immediately went to surveillance cameras. They requested the footage from the Brinks truck, and they found immediate footage from businesses around the chase. And this is when they got their first glimpse at a true serial robber. The first thing they noticed when Bond popped out is that he was at a Culver City bus stop. And this is how Bond was not ready to come home and commit a crime. He didn't realize that since 1994, every bus out here got a camera system on it. While he was sitting at the bus stop, the Culver City bus caught him on camera, bare face. But even more, it also caught a partial view of the stolen Tahoe. They found that Bond had circled the block before he parked and was inside the Chase parking lot waiting. They also got with that witness that said Bond was out of breath when he was running. That witness also saw Bond getting into the Tahoe, so of course now that's their main focus. They take the partial plate and put it into a controversial system that's been making a lot of headlines in the city of LA, the flock cameras. They use the license plate readers to ping other locations that the Tahoe may have hit, and they came up with a match. The same distinct black trash bag over the back window, the same black rims, and they put a bolo out on the Tahoe. But Bond had other plans. He's taking the money back to the West Side residences, parked the Tahoe off of Hillcrest, and has jumped back into his Benz. And 4 hours after the robbery, Bond is on the same street, Sepulveda Boulevard, but he hits Fox Hills Mall. He runs straight into Daniel's Jewelers, and he gets cracking. He buys a gold and diamond chain, the most expensive one in the store, a matching diamond bracelet, and a diamond pinky ring. And Bond pulls out $11,000 in crispy bills inside of Daniel's. Now, this would prove to be a mistake. With this purchase being over $10,000, this triggered an IRS form to be filled out. And with that, they took a copy of Bond's driver's license with receipt of the purchase. But Bond wasn't done. After he put that shit on, he stayed in the store for another 40 minutes and decided he needed a pendant to go on the chain. Cashed out again right there at Daniel's. And the time is now 2:50 p.m. But back in Inglewood, detectives are still trying to glue together this Tahoe, and they realize that it's not reported stolen, but it's out of the city of San Bernardino. And this is when detectives pull up on the registered owners of the Tahoe. Now, the owner stated that they realized the Tahoe was missing back in May of 2023. They said the Tahoe had mechanical issues and the registration tags had just expired. So they thought the tow company that serviced the apartment building they lived in towed the truck just because of the registration, and they thought nothing of it. They weren't looking to get it fixed, and they went on about their lives until they started getting parking tickets from the city of Inglewood. The tickets were coming from Hillcrest and La Cienega. And this is when they realized that the Tahoe had possibly been stolen. But after so much time had passed, and again, with them not really caring about the Tahoe, they didn't file a police report. And detectives are back on the dead end. But Bond is just getting started. On the day of his robbery, he had $9.13 in his Bank of America account. And he drops $1,000 cash into the ATM. 5 days after the robbery, the Tahoe is still not found. And Bond is buying more jewelry. He's back in Kevin's Jewelers, this time dropping $800 in Culver City. And over the next couple weeks, Bond has deposited $13,000 in cash into his bank accounts, a Bank of America and a Chase account. But on August 27th, 9 in the morning, a patrol unit is spinning through Inglewood, and they find something that looks familiar. At 924 Hillcrest Boulevard, around the corner from Markham Bond's apartment, they spot the green Tahoe. It's parked and the officers can't tell if somebody is inside the vehicle. So they get out the car, guns drawn, and look through the window of the Tahoe. And it's almost unbelievable what they came up with. In the back seat lies a black Raiders hat, white shoes, and a blue gator. All pieces of clothing matching what the suspect wore in the robbery. But if that wasn't enough, laying on the floor is the Brinks cold bag, empty, left in the Tahoe. Police immediately impound the Tahoe and perform DNA analysis on everything in the back seat. Now, due to caseload, DNA testing can take a minimum of 90 days, but that's subjective. But in this case, it gave Bond a lot of time to play. A week after the Tahoe is impounded, it's unknown if Bond notices or cares that this car is now missing. But he's in Louis Vuitton, September 8th, 2023, and he's doing it big. Dropped $7,000, but he stayed true to his roots. He also went to the Inglewood swap meet and dropped $800 on some clothes. He's made multiple $5,000 deposits trying to break the money up into his account. And on September 21st, 2023, he's doing it big. Books a flight to St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands, but Delta put him on a layover in Atlanta, and he's making purchases in Atlanta. He gets to the Virgin Islands. Bond put himself in the Ritz-Carlton, spent another $5,000 on jewelry in St. Thomas, and he books an excursion through Ocean Safari. He's privated a charter boat, watching that sunset with some pizza. And Bond touches back down in the city of Inglewood, still with a little bit more money to play. But he lays low through the month of October. And on November 8th, 2023, a DNA match stating that Markham David Bond was 1 in septillion times more likely to be the owner and wearer of that black Raiders hat found in the black Tahoe. And Bond's 40-year criminal run starts to come to an end. Now, because Bond is on supervised release, the first thing they do is tap his PO. His PO says she recognizes him. Of course, his bare face is completely out at the scene of the robbery. But she also says that he's worn the Raiders hat to his probation appointments. When they pulled his DMV and probation records, they realized that his house was 0.1 miles away from where they found the Tahoe. And on November 22nd, 2023, 3 months after the robbery, they kick Markham Bond's door in. They find a gun in the trash can underneath the trash bag. And in the mini fridge, in a plastic bag, they found $9,000 left over after Bond's shopping spree from the Chase robbery. Now, of course, when LAPD interviewed Bond about this robbery, he denied any involvement. But he said that he has been in that Chase parking lot multiple times because he has a Chase account. But either way, Bond is taken to MDC and he's sitting in a cell. Now, Bond makes a phone call to an individual named Theodore Edmond, and the feds sit back because they can't believe that Bond is a one-man team out here. And they realize that Theodore Edmond is somebody who was also released on compassionate release by the Biden administration. He served 20 years in the feds with Markham Bond. He was sentenced to life for running a $16 million heroin operation. And after that MDC phone call, the feds immediately opened an investigation on Theodore Edmond. Now, they couldn't prove that Theodore was a part of the robbery on the scene, so they tried to look into him for an accessory after the fact. When they pulled Bond's cell phone records, they found that after the robbery, he was in the area of Theodore Edmond's house. And after the robbery, he called Theodore Edmond. But it seemed like Edmond played it smart. He didn't like his time in the feds, especially after dodging the L. And the feds couldn't stick anything on him for this robbery. Now the feds start going through Bond's bank accounts. In his financial statements, they see the influx of deposits after the robbery. Some of his pension payments were $166, and he was known for having less than $200 in his account. They saw the Delta baggage fees, all the excursions he went on, and after losing 2 trials previously, Bond decides to take a third one. Now, due to Bond's criminal history, he was facing a minimum of 25 years in prison. So prosecutors had to start at the beginning for Bond, all the way back in 1984, after the Air Force, where he joined his father, Theodore Bond Sr., and 3 other co-conspirators in selling heroin. Now, Bond and his father started off as deliverers and negotiators, but the whole time, a 20-year-old Markham Bond didn't know his father had him negotiating with the feds, undercover agents. And on November 15th of 1984, Bond sells $240,000 worth of heroin to the undercover agents. The agents also bought that much money to the transaction as well, let Bond thumb through it. And when he was done, they took him down that day. Now, he was also released the same day that he went down, and this is when and how he got into robberies. After fucking up a $250,000 deal, Bond is down on his luck. And 2 months later, Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1985, he robs his first bank. Now, this was on Temple Street, a federal credit union, and Bond's get down at the time was running inside and pistol whipping the teller, and he made off with $4,800 on this move. And in a 2-week time span, from March 28th to April 8th, 1985, Bond goes on to pull 5 more robberies, but only coming up with about $7,000 before the feds step in again. And Bond now has 2 federal indictments stacked at 21 years old. He's sentenced to 8 years in the feds for the robberies, 4 years for the heroin. That ran concurrent. Bond is back on the streets in 93. And just like his most recent move, he got antsy. March 2nd, 94, he decides to go big though. This time he tracked the Brinks route outside of Knott's Berry Farm. He used a disguise this time, a mailman, equipped with a mail bag. As the armor guard approaches, Bond turns around with a 4.5 and says, "Here we go." He has an unnamed accomplice on his move, and that accomplice helped him lay the guard down, put him in spread eagle position, told him not to do nothing stupid, stripped his pistol, and also stripped him for $73,000. But that wasn't enough. 4 months later, Bond is back in his hometown of Inglewood, and this time he's targeting Hollywood Park, the racetrack. At this time in July of 94, there's a Wells Fargo armored truck that services Hollywood Park. Bond and his accomplice had been plotting on him. Now, two people got out this Wells Fargo truck, and they laid both of them down with their heads touching each other, and they handcuffed them. Again, they took the pistols, and they make off with $380,000 back in '94. Now, when police got to the scene at Hollywood Park, they were in communication with Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo was already in the process of sending them the serial numbers for the money that was stolen. And crazy enough, Markham Bond has been pulled over shortly after the robbery. He's found with $50,000 in the trunk of his car, and the serial numbers on those bills match the ones Wells Fargo was giving the police. And Bond is down the same day as the robbery. And this is the situation that led to him receiving 562 months in federal prison, a 46-year sentence with another 25-year minimum. So now that the prosecutors have aired out Bond's dirty past, the jury is seemingly convinced, but they wasn't done. They bought the salesman from Daniel's Jewelers out of Fox Hills to break down how Bond cashed out on the jewelry and how he had came back and got some of his jewelry serviced. They bought one of his neighbors from the West Side residences and had her testify how she's seen him multiple times in that Black Raiders hat. And with Bond's 40-year criminal run coming to an end, over $615,000 stolen across all his robberies. On December 12th, 2024, Markham Bond is found guilty on all charges. Now, with Bond being 62, facing a mandatory minimum of 25 years, this is essentially a life sentence. But his brother, sister, and his lawyer start to try to help Bond with his sentencing position. They speak about how the system failed him, how they threw him out after almost 27 years with no help. Bond starts getting busy with the letters again, writing the judge, saying how he's sorry, how he didn't mean to affect the victims the way he did. And his lawyer pleads to have Bond home in his early 80s. Even with his health conditions, he could potentially outlive that kind of sentence. But the judge wasn't having it. Bond said he wasn't going to be an embarrassment when he pled for compassionate release back in 2021. And that's exactly what he was to the federal government. They handed down 346 months to Markham Bond, a 28-year sentence. And with a 15% reduction with good behavior, Markham Bond could be home at 85 years old. This was the second installment in season 2 of How to Rob. If you thought Markham Bond was tripping, we got some Pyrus that rather put a murder down before they go into the feds. This Rap News Street Politics, the best hood channel on YouTube. Y'all make sure y'all stay tuned for the next one. We out.